The 6 o'clock news from the BBC with Peter Sissons and Moira Stewart.
Good evening. The headlines at 6 o'clock. President Gorbachev tells the Soviet Communist Party that it can't keep a monopoly on power. He says they must reform or recede into the background. The next crucial party congress is brought forward again. Boris Yeltsin, one of Mr. Gorbachev's sternest critics, says he's not sure reform can be achieved without violence. Here, school inspectors
also called for an end to Article 6 when they brought their demands to the Kremlin last year. And yesterday's massive protest in Moscow was clearly the last straw, demonstrating that public opinion wants the process of change to go faster and further than even the reformist wing of the leadership. Mr. Gorbachev is a communist himself, and he's not weakening communist power through any abstract ideals or principles. He's doing it because he knows the party is losing its grip on the Soviet people, and that if it resists the pressure for change, it could face the same fate as the Ceausescu regime in Romania. Martin Sixsmith, BBC News, Moscow.
Boris Yeltsin, the party radical who was sacked from the Politburo in 1986, has warned Mr. Gorbachev that his days are numbered unless he joins with the party's radical forces.
The public is calling for greater freedom from Moscow. Bill Turnbull has been to the Ukraine's capital, Kiev, where despite 5 years of perestroika, there are still food queues and local officials remain opposed to change.
There is food in the shops here, but it takes hours to buy, there's little choice, and the quality is poor. Economically, at least, perestroika is not delivering the goods.
We don't have anything. There's no fruit, there are no vegetables. We can't even get medicine, cough syrup or pills. We don't have anything at all.
On the outskirts of the city, there are hundreds of wagons loaded with goods waiting to be emptied. But there simply isn't the equipment or the organization to get the job done. One senior member of the Ukrainian Communist Party claims such backlogs have one clear cause, a deliberate conspiracy of incompetence.
I believe more than half of the people who work for the government here are opposed to perestroika. They just don't want to accept it. These people don't want to change anything. Everything bad in this country is the result of this opposition. That's why we haven't moved forward for 5 years.
The communist elite of the Ukraine have a lot to lose. These blocks of luxury apartments, complete with panoramic views, have been built especially for them. Hundreds of official, chauffeur-driven cars are available for their private use. Perestroika, in its true sense, would put an end to all this. 2 weeks ago, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians gathered for a nationalist demonstration, waving flags that were banned just 12 months ago and demanding greater freedom from Moscow. The tide of public dissent here is visibly gaining momentum.
People are tired of only having promises to eat. And people get so indignant that I'm starting to worry. Perhaps one day it might even cause a revolution.
Despite the obstacles put in its way, the campaign for democracy in the Ukraine has made extraordinary progress. But it still has a long way to go. Bill Turnbull, BBC News, Kiev.
Here, school inspectors say that 1 in 3 pupils is getting a
oust the old order, fueled by the despair born of the squalid, overcrowded living conditions that contrast so pitifully with the excesses of the apparatchiks. The other news tonight, here the government's own. In many parts of the Soviet Union, the party is already beginning to reform itself. The regional party committee at Tyumen in Siberia, which controls 2/3 of the country's oil and gas reserves, has sacked its entire Politburo. In addition, local leaders in Chernigov in the Ukraine, Volgograd, Vladivostok in the east, and Tomsk have all been sacked. Our Moscow correspondent David Smith spent a week in Tyumen and sends this special report on how party reform is gathering pace with or without Moscow's lead.
Siberia.
The Russian writer Maxim Gorky once called it the land of death and chains. Yet for the Soviet people it represents something else as well. The land of opportunity, the land of untold riches, gas and oil. A land of promise then, as well as prison. And it is in such places so vital to the economy that the fate of Mr. Gorbachev's revolution will be decided.
Siberia has a special aura in the Soviet mind. That's like the new frontier. So you go east, young man, just as in America you go west, young man. And when you look at the regions which are newly developed and which are so important to the economy, then you look at the political changes there and the political climate there as perhaps a sign of things to come for the nation as a whole.
The oil and gas fields of the Tyumen region in western Siberia are some of the biggest in the world. No one can overestimate their importance to the economy. More than half the Soviet Union's oil and gas comes from here. Over 50% of the country's foreign currency earnings are generated on the Siberian plain. Stability, then, an imperative for the Kremlin. Brezhnev made the oil men an elite, the wealthiest labor force in the Union. That hasn't changed under Gorbachev. Today, these men earn 1,000 rubles a month, 4 times the national average. Yet Gorbachev's reforms have given them something they've never had before, the freedom to speak up. And now they express the same fears as almost everyone else in this country. The fear that perestroika is grinding to a halt. The fear that Mr. Gorbachev cannot make it work.
Не скажу, что сейчас перестройка слишком сильно работает.
No, perestroika isn't really working. It may seem to be at higher levels, but here on the ground, it's not.
I don't expect anything in my lifetime. My son might see results, but I won't.
Do you believe in Gorbachev?
Горбачев.
I don't know. We don't believe in anything now. We've been deceived too long. There are no results from all this talking, these plenums and congresses. They talk, but there's nothing to eat.
Как партийный работник, я ее вдвойне чувствую.
As a party leader, as well as a citizen, I have an extra responsibility. But I see empty shelves and I feel the irritation of the people. And just one spark could ignite the whole situation.
From the very beginning, Mr. Gorbachev recognized the importance of Siberia. His second visit out of Moscow after coming to power in 1985 was to Tyumen. And it was here that the new leader first laid down one of the tenets of his thinking. The Communist Party, he said, had to be the cutting edge of perestroika. The party had to show the country the way by reforming itself.
Какие-то могут возникать вопросы, как с хозяйством перестроить, там, заводы как использовать. Это другой вопрос, это будем обсуждать. Здесь нет. И начинать это с партии, с руководящих кадров. В партии, с руководящих кадров начинается дисциплина, начинается мораль, начинается социальная справедливость, отношение к делу, облик нашего советского.
Mr. Gorbachev has had to wait nearly 5 years for the party to listen. Wasted years which have created doubt and despair, even led to talk of strikes in the oil fields. But in the past month, the breakthrough has come. The party has finally purged itself.
It's precisely what President Gorbachev has always sought. A revolution within the party, not from above, but from below. If, as so many Soviets believe, the president has just a matter of months left, then what's happening here in Siberia today represents his best chance of long-term survival. Or looked at the other way, his last hope.
Communist Party headquarters in the old regional capital of Tyumen. The date is January the 19th. The Central Committee has been called into emergency session. For the first time ever, the cameras are allowed in as well. What follows is a battle for the soul of the party.
The ideology secretary demands the resignation of the party boss, who has run Tumién for 17 years.
Сегодня нам нужно пересмотреть не только всю точку зрения на социализм. Сегодня нам нужно пересмотреть всю точку зрения и на партию. И в этой связи встает вопрос, если переходя от высоких сфер конкретной политики к тому, о чем мы сегодня здесь с вами говорим. Каким должен быть первый секретарь областного комитета партии? Каким должно быть бюро? Каким должен вообще быть областной комитет партии и каждая первичная партийная организация?
Я за отставку, но за отставку с отчетом и персональной ответственностью каждого. И в этом отношении поддерживаю товарища Муковоза, потому что об этом шел разговор и на пленуме Уральского горкома КПСС. Товарищи, меня ни в коей мере как коммунисты не может устроить полугласность в работе Политбюро. Ну сколько можно декларировать мы за демократию и за гласность? Сегодня я вправе как коммунист потребовать с Политбюро отчета на предстоящем пленуме. Я прошу, чтобы это записали в решение пленума. Отчета каждого члена Политбюро. А что он сделал за почти 5 лет перестройки?
Сегодня у нас есть шанс начать перестройку с себя, выбрать путь будущего движения, а поэтому, повторяю, я за коллективную отставку бюро, за предоставление членам областного комитета партии, первичным парторганизациям возможности широкого выбора.
Self-purification and responsibility to the people. Hardly the maxims that have guided the Soviet Communist Party down the years. This is a hunting lodge on the outskirts of Tumién. Until recently, it was used by Siberia's oil minister, a senior party man. By Soviet standards, it is luxurious. In a country where families live in one room, unbelievably spacious. Fit for Mr. and Mrs. Gorbachev, who stayed here in 1985. But the kind of privileged lifestyle that has always set the party apart from the people. Here, they'd even had this lake cleaned so that party members could swim safely in summer. Now, if the reformers have their way, the party is scrapping such privileges. No longer will the few enjoy that which the masses can only dream of. Healthcare, for example. The party's clinic is reserved for just 900 people, senior apparatchiks and their families, party and army veterans. Everything here from hydrotherapy units to high-tech cardiac treatment, the kind of facilities not available in Tumién's general hospitals.
It's very good here. Conditions are excellent because there aren't so many people to treat. The facilities we have here are very good to work with.
Gorbachev, well, I support what he's doing. It's the right thing. Although, of course, he's made mistakes.
Within the next few weeks, the party says, the city's baby clinic will have a new home in that party hospital. The need could hardly be greater. In Tumién today, there are 17,000 children in need of special care. Infant mortality is abnormally high here, and there are at the moment just 2 specialist paediatricians available to the general public. That kind of policy, brazenly putting the party before the people, may seem indefensible in the age of Gorbachev. But at the plenum of the Central Committee, the party's conservatives lashed out at Gorbachev's democracy and said the party should hold the line here.
Коммунисты района высказывают удивление способности многих наших товарищей быстро перестраиваться в зависимости от создавшейся конъюнктуры. В октябре проголосовали за доверие, в январе всю вину свалили на того, кому вчера доверяли. Флюгерная позиция поддержки у народа не находит и не найдет.
Сегодня мы не подвели объективную основу для подлинной демократии. У нас даже нет законов для этого. И как бы ни резало слух, в нынешний переходный период необходимо подчинение воле тысяч единой воле. Жутко, но даже в мультфильмах детям утверждают, чем больше безобразий, тем больше демократии. Все это кому-то надо, но убежден не народу. Это интересы аппарата. определенной части представителей интеллектуального труда, так называемых белых воротничков. В Чехословакии уже ввели в обиход слово «товарищ», вместо слова «товарищ» слово «пан». Мы идем к тому, что скоро вместо слова «товарищ» будет «господин».
It was at this point that the plenum broke down into several camps. Some wanted any decision put off for a special conference. The old guard intervened, insisting that this was not the way to proceed. But the reformers, specifically the party leaders from the oil fields, wanted the issue resolved now.
We have to decide now what the party's main task is, and we have to hurry up. Otherwise, we'll only have months left to act in, not years. Why do I say this? Because for too long, economics has been sacrificed to politics. Today, we have to give more time to economics.
Economics before politics. Spend some time in the oil towns of Tymien, and you see why so many in the Communist Party now feel they can wait no longer. Compared to the rest of the country, Siberia is well off. But people pay much higher prices here because everything they buy has to be shipped thousands of miles. And today, virtually everything is rationed. It means tightening your belt, something modern Siberia has never really known. Worse still, these are people who have grown accustomed to long stretches in the oil fields and then a few days back home. Mr. Gorbachev's campaign against alcohol is anathema to such communities. The nightly queue for vodka is a fairly desperate sight.
Да что, пусть Горбачев посмотрит, что давай еще забросим наверх одного, аккуратно.
It is in the endless panoply of tenement blocks, though, that the crisis is writ large. People who work the richest land in the country are living in appalling conditions. Water is something you carry from one tap at the end of a corridor that might serve a dozen apartments. Home, in many cases, is one room. It is not uncommon to find a whole family living like this. It is a monument to what the party has not done, to the politics of productivity at all costs. It is certainly not socialism with a human face.
Это разве жизнь? Какая же это жизнь?
Is this life? What kind of life is this? You can't call it life. 6 people live here, all adults. The girls go to college, but there's nowhere they can study. If one's in here, the other has to work out in the hall. And there's nowhere to dry clothes either. This is how we live, here in the Soviet Union.
In the end, Gennady Bokomyakov, party boss in Tymien since 1972, made it easy for everyone.
Как вы знаете, я более четверти века член областного комитета партии, 17-й год первый секретарь. Люди ждут чего-то нового, увязывая с этим какие-то, так сказать, необычные изменения значит, в деятельности областной партийной организации, в жизни тружеников области. Но все-таки видел, что, так сказать, настроение у значительной части, хотя, может, и не у подавляющей, как мне думается, у значительной части коммунистов, что, так сказать, ну, желание изменений, значит, не иссякло. Это привело меня к мысли, что, наверное, так сказать, надо...
The new party leader is Viktor Kitaev. He promises change. He insists the only way forward is multi-party democracy. And what the Central Committee plenum in Moscow this week is debating. A Soviet Union where the party will no longer reign supreme.
What do you personally stand for? What sort of party do you want?
Партия прежде всего должна уйти от диктата.
The party, first of all, has to give up its dictatorship and give up its monopoly on power. It's this monopoly that has caused us problems everywhere. In culture, in the science, in the economy, in politics. This monopoly has never brought positive results, has never paid back what it owed. It has never given people the freedom to create. There must be competition now, both in the party and in politics. There should be alternatives and competition.
No longer after this does President Gorbachev stand alone in demanding that the party accept an end to its monopoly. No longer does the party lag behind the people. And this is happening not just in Siberia, but in other crucial areas of the old Russian Empire: Volgograd, Vladivostok, Tomsk.
It is part of a much wider picture. We've seen similar rebellions in the party ranks in other areas of the country, and I'm sure that there will be more. It's what we have been expecting for quite a while, because the party must catch up with the train of change which has left the station.
How much of a breakthrough is this for Gorbachev, and how important is it for him?
Well, I think it's a very important piece of good news, because it shows that his scenario of change, his scenario of reform is working, is being vindicated. He has always maintained that the party can lead this revolution, that the party is not destined, is not sentenced by destiny to remain the party of the status quo, that there's a huge progressive potential, and the issue is how to uncork it.
Back in the oil fields, there's a warning for Mr. Gorbachev. The Communist Party here, responding to the people, may be going his way. But they will not stop here. They will wait for him no longer. This week's plenum in Moscow has to be a turning point. Nothing else will satisfy them.
We've built a society of beggars. For all these 72 years, someone's been begging something from someone else. Towns from the region, regions from the union, managers from ministers. Everything has to change now. Everyone must be rewarded according to the work he does.
The Communist Party of the Soviet Union has never spoken quite like that before. It is doing so now because the people are demanding action. Promises will no longer do. Mr. Gorbachev's waited a long time for this, too long maybe, but it shows that he's not doomed to failure, and that after 5 years his revolution is finally getting off the ground. David Smith, ITN, Siberia.
We'll be returning to the Moscow question a little later in the programme. The East German Parliament has voted to include...
In Moscow was clearly the last straw, demonstrating that public opinion wants the process of change to go faster and further than even the reformist wing of the leadership, and showing the party to be hopelessly lagging behind society as a whole. Mr. Gorbachev is a communist himself, and he's not weakening communist power through any abstract ideals or principles. He's doing it because he knows the party is losing its grip on the Soviet people, and that if it resists the pressure for change, it could face the same fate as the Ceausescu regime in Romania. Martin Sixsmith, BBC News, Moscow.
Mr. Gorbachev's plan to transform the role of the Soviet Communist Party is the latest and most radical move in his attempts to implement perestroika, the modernization of the Soviet economy. He's trying to defuse the opposition of conservative rivals and curb nationalist unrest in the Soviet Union. As Brian Hanrahan reports, today's speech is a gamble. The political risks are now extremely high.
The boundless energy with which Mr. Gorbachev began his reform program 5 years ago simply ran into the ground. The smiling bureaucrats of the Communist Party agreed with his slogans but did nothing. They'd seen off other reformers before, and in time they thought they'd outlast Mr. Gorbachev too. When he summoned a special party conference in 1988, they blocked his attempts to bring in new blood. And so Mr. Gorbachev realized that to bypass the complacent ranks of the communist faithful, he would have to tear the party itself away from power. Until then, perestroika had been primarily an economic program. Now it became a political crusade. At first, Mr. Gorbachev appeared as a neutral referee between conservatives and radicals. But his policies isolated the conservatives, identified with Mr. Ligachev, and now, with the party congress only months away, he's abandoning them.
For a long time, Mr. Gorbachev, as is natural for any party leader, tried to hold the party together and tried to bridge the gap. But as the gap became wider between the two wings of the party, he had to really choose, and he chose to go with the reformers. This is why he's really bounced the Conservatives into this Central Committee. He's mobilized public opinion outside the Central Committee in order to get his policies through.
But the radical solution opens a dangerous prospect. Azerbaijanis and Armenians are already killing each other after the collapse of communist authority. Communism has been the only common factor holding 100 different nationalities together. Once it's gone, each of the constituent republics will develop separately and grow apart, splintering the Soviet Union.
At present, the country will hold together because it's held together for 70 years, and therefore there's tradition there. But once one part of the country begins to fragment, such as the Baltic republics, that will accelerate the process. And the other thing which will accelerate the process will in fact be economic decline, which will force each republic, each area to find its own solution and thereby ignore Moscow.
Within a reborn Russian republic, Mr. Gorbachev's first task will be to stop himself being outflanked by the populist radicalism of Boris Yeltsin, who represents a major strand of communist opinion. Mr. Yeltsin is a political outsider, but it can't be long before the other factions inside the party, the nationalists and the Marxists, also start to operate outside the Kremlin's cloak.
The economic problems facing Mr. Gorbachev are obvious in the towns and cities of the Ukraine, where despite 5 years of perestroika, the food queues are longer than ever. Their Soviet inefficiency is being made worse by bureaucrats who just don't want reform.
They call this Brezhnev's mother, a vast war memorial built during the 70s at enormous expense, now a hated symbol of the bad old days. It dominates the city skyline, just as Brezhnev's spirit still hangs over the Ukraine. There is food in the shops here, but it takes hours to buy, there's little choice, and the quality is poor. Economically, at least, perestroika is not delivering the goods.
We don't have anything. There's no fruit, there are no vegetables. We can't even get medicine, cough syrup or pills. We don't have anything at all.
On the outskirts of the city, there are hundreds of wagons loaded with goods waiting to be emptied. But there simply isn't the equipment or the organization to get the job done. One senior member of the Ukrainian Communist Party claims such backlogs have one clear cause, a deliberate conspiracy of incompetence.
I believe more than half of the people who work for the government here are opposed to perestroika. They just don't want to accept it. These people don't want to change anything. Everything bad in this country is the result of this opposition. That's why we haven't moved forward for 5 years.
The communist elite of the Ukraine have a lot to lose. These blocks of luxury apartments, complete with panoramic views, have been built especially for them. Hundreds of official, chauffeur-driven cars are available for their private use. Perestroika, in its true sense, would put an end to all this. Despite the obstacles put in its way, the campaign for democracy in the Ukraine has made extraordinary progress, but it still has a long way to go. Bill Turnbull, BBC News, Kiev.
Standards in a third of England's schools are
since the disaster at the nuclear power plant at Chernobyl in the Soviet Union. But the effects of that disaster are still bringing despair and frustration to the people who live in the area. Villages around Narodichi, about 40 miles from Chernobyl, were never evacuated. The radiation levels are dangerously high and health is seriously affected. But little is being done to help. Bill Turnbull reports.
This is the land known as the Dead Zone. No one has lived here for nearly 4 years because of radioactive contamination from Chernobyl. The ground behind these fences is too dangerous to enter. Officially, though, the main road which runs between them is safe enough to travel on. After the disaster in April 1986, tens of thousands of people were evacuated from villages like this. Houses and farms deserted, vast areas of land abandoned to nature. But only half a mile away, this village is still inhabited, even though the authorities have known it's been contaminated for more than 3 years. The level of radiation here before the disaster was 0.02 milliröntgens. The readings we've been getting in this village today, though, have been up to 1.55, more than 70 times as high, and 6 times greater than the highest acceptable levels in Britain. Nuclear experts in the West say this community should have been evacuated long ago. These villagers get an allowance of 30 rubles a month to buy uncontaminated food shipped in from elsewhere. They call it coffin money, for they say they are living with a poison they can't see or smell or feel, and it's killing them.
People keep dying, but how can we know whether they die of radiation or something else? But young people keep dying too, more and more of them, and I think one day they will all start dropping together like flies.
In the nearby town of Narodici, it's the children who are causing most concern, for they appear to be feeling the worst effects. Their parents say they suffer from headaches and fatigue, and their eyesight is deteriorating.
Just look at our poor children. My daughter has a swollen thyroid gland. For 4 years we've been living with this radiation. They've been promising to move us, but nothing has happened. The authorities haven't done anything for us.
At this hospital in Kiev, doctors regularly monitor the condition of children from affected areas, but they refuse to admit that any damage to their health has been caused by the contamination. Since April 1986, all statistics on cancer and heart disease in the Ukraine have been classified as secret. Officially, the disaster of Chernobyl has still claimed only 31 lives. Bill Turnbull, BBC News, Narodici.
A committee of MPs says the government...
Thousands of Ukrainian villagers are still being exposed to dangerously high levels of radiation. Many were not evacuated and now blame the disaster for their ill health. As Bill Turnbull reports, they have lost faith in the government and the doctors who failed to protect them.
This is the land known as the Dead Zone. No one has lived here for nearly 4 years because of radioactive contamination from Chernobyl. The ground behind these fences is too dangerous to enter. Officially, though, the main road which runs between them is safe enough to travel on. After the disaster in April 1986, tens of thousands of people were evacuated from villages like this. Houses and farms deserted, vast areas of land abandoned to nature. But only half a mile away, this village is still inhabited, even though the authorities have known it's been contaminated for more than 3 years. The level of radiation here before the disaster was 0.02 milliröntgens. The readings we've been getting in this village today, though, have been up to 1.55, more than 70 times as high, and 6 times greater than the highest acceptable levels in Britain. Nuclear experts in the West say this community should have been evacuated long ago, but life here continues as normal.
We would like to leave, but where can we go? Youngsters can find work on other farms, but we're retired. No one wants old people.
In the nearby town of Narodici, it's the children who are causing most concern, for they appear to be feeling the worst effects. Their parents say they suffer from headaches and fatigue, and their eyesight is deteriorating.
Just look at our poor children. My daughter has a swollen thyroid gland. For 4 years we've been living with this radiation. They've been promising to move us, but nothing has happened. The authorities haven't done anything for us.
The citizens of Narodici no longer trust the government or the doctors. Instead, hundreds of them converged on the town from surrounding villages, frantically seeking a cure for their ills from a faith healer. Alexander Kashpirovsky is a household name in the Soviet Union, famous for his televised attempts at mass hypnosis. He is the last hope for the people here, for they are trapped in an environmental nightmare which is still unfolding and which will haunt their children for the rest of their lives. Bill Turnbull, BBC News, Narodici.
Tonight's main news again. The American government said
at least they feel closer to God, but they're very far from the gods of the marketplace. The inner richness of spiritual life contrasts with the external poverty of the millions elsewhere whom their industry must feed. The Soviet Union must be better fed. This failure gnaws at the heart of perestroika. Salichat is a fishing town in the north of the Russian Republic. It saw more prosperous days when it serviced the camps of Stalin's Gulag nearby. Now only the slogans remain. There is little variety in the diet. People do live better than they did, but with higher expectations, they are angry that they cannot get more.
Что, ни мыла теперь, ни порошка, ничего не стало. До чего дошли-то? Вот и вся перестройка.
У нас основное что питье? Чай. Чай в основном. Здесь 9 месяцев зима. А у нас сахар по талонам.
В 1953 году, когда погиб наш Сталин, мы все рыдали, плакали. Нам, конечно, было жалко ему. Мы жили лучше, жили, как сейчас живем. У нас все было. Колбаса по рубль 20, и все были окорок. Поросята были, эти, как они сказать, копченые, стояли на витринах. Никто не брал. Колбаса выше 4 рублей не было. А сейчас мы что кушаем? 10 рублей, и та тухлая. И есть нельзя. Одна сухая, вообще высохшая. Да. За Сталина у нас был лучше, чем сейчас Горбачев.
In Moscow, the better off are buying up jewelry as a hedge against inflation and for want of anything else.
Просто больше нечего купить и не во что вложить эти деньги. Машину нельзя купить, дачу нельзя купить. Может быть, эти побрякушки хотя бы купить пока.
Now, if we are looking what perestroika still has achieved, certainly nothing in the field of economics. Vice versa is true. Really, standard of living is still lowering, and inflation, shortage of goods, all things are really starting harder for people. So the man from the street in this space can't support perestroika, but in the same time, the big thing, fear, is going out of our society.
Fear was the cement which held Stalin's empire together. Only in his native Georgia do his grandiose monuments remain. But Russian tourists still come to look round his birthplace, although the adjoining museum has been shut. The cult is kept alive by private museums, like this one in a Tbilisi garden. Visitors can see all Stalin's extraordinary career, with special emphasis on the erroneous claim that he reduced prices throughout his last 5 years.
სურსათი აღარ ყოფნის და არც არის და ბევრი ასეთი როგორც უპასუხებლო ხალხი თანამდებობის პირები არიან. ომი რომ დამთავრდა, მეორე წელსვე ბარათები მოისპო მოსპო იოსებ სტალინმა და თანდათყოლწლიურად უმჯობესდებოდა ხალხის მატერიალური კეთილდღეობა. ყველაფერი იყო წერილად თქვი მაღაზიებში, სურსათი, ყველაფერი. ახლა კი უკან მიდის ეს ჩვენ ცხოვრება. მე კი არა ყველა მას იძახის. ყველა ვისაც გინდა შეეგეთოთ, სულ ყველა მას იძახის, რომ აი ახლა რომ 37 წელი ყოფილიყო, 80% დასაჭერი და დასახვრეტია. იმ დანაშაულზე, რომელიც დანაშაულიც მაშინ ხდებოდა. ახლა უფრო უმეტესია. ახალი სახლები ინგრევა შეგეთ. სხასათული სახლები ინგრევა და ეს უკვე სტალინის დროს დაგრეულიყო. ბოძი სტოლბა რო წაქცეულიყო, იმაზე იჭერდნენ და ეს ხო ხალხის
Мы жили до войны очень трудно, но мы видели, что мы с каждым днем живем
все лучше и лучше. Мы видели, как с каждым днем повышается авторитет нашего государства на международной арене. Если сейчас сравнить 1953 год с сегодняшним днем, то авторитет Советского Союза был гораздо выше в мире и среди коммунистических и рабочих партий, чем он сейчас. Мы растеряли тот авторитет своей отчизны, который мы имели при Сталине. Мы лишились нравственных ценностей, которыми мы жили, за которые мы боролись. Честь, совесть, порядочность, искренность, любовь к родине, мы этого лишились.
Stalin's empire has unraveled, starting in the Baltic states. The human chain which linked the three Baltic republics seemed to their Russian minorities to be hemming them in. This modern housing estate at Tallinn, Estonia, could be in Moscow, except that it is better built. Here live the Russian and other immigrants who have flooded into Estonia since Stalin annexed it in 1940. They are now in passionate and nervous debate about whether they could live in an independent Estonia.
Мы рабочий класс, понимаете, все от нас зависит. И на эстонском, и на русском. Давайте пройдем посмотрим.
Просто есть желание запугать нас, что мы не освоим этого языка, что нам здесь будет трудно, что с этим языком ты можешь, как говорится, иметь и специальности, работать, и все, а без языка, значит, просто надо уехать.
History has gone into reverse. In 1940, Stalin used the troops he already had based in Estonia to force its annexation. Hundreds of thousands of Estonians were deported. The annexation was welcomed by Estonian communists like Johannes Lauristin. Lauristin is remembered as the founder of Soviet Estonia. He died before he could see what Stalin would do with his country. Now his daughter Mariu is a leader of the independence movement. The Popular Front has just held its Congress in Tallinn before the March elections. Under its pressure, even Estonia's Communist Party has declared for independence.
Our people have wanted to be independent from the last century. Then we had independent republic for 20 years between two wars. And this independent state was occupied and annexed at 40, but in the minds of peoples, of Estonians, it have been lived all the time. Gorbachev has been very good in outer relations. He's ready to negotiate with everybody in the West and in the East, but up to this time, not with people in this country. There are very mighty forces in the Soviet Union who are pushing back in the opposite direction. And if nobody will push forward, what then happen in the Soviet Union?
Others push harder still. Quietly and deliberately, the Estonian Citizens Committee is making a register of those who can claim descent from the population of 1940. It's a game of grandmother's footsteps with the non-Estonian minority, who are now described as occupiers, without the automatic rights of citizenship.
From the point of view of international law, we are absolutely in the same situation as France was during World War II. And no one has ever accused the French people of being a separatist or nationalist against Nazis. They were just patriots trying to get the German occupants out of their country. And we're doing exactly the same thing, that our task is to get the Soviet occupants out of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania.
Я считаю, что это просто провокация. Нет нелегальных иммигрантов. Есть люди, которые в 1944 году освободили эту землю от фашизма. Есть такие люди, многие из них остались здесь. Мой отец, кстати, разминировал Таллинский залив от фашистских мин в свое время. Я не считаю его здесь нелегальным иммигрантом. Здесь пролита кровь сотен и сотен тысяч людей. После этого считать их здесь нелегальным иммигрантом, я вам скажу, если бы не победа той самой советской армии, которую так модно сейчас охаивать в эстонских кругах, эстонский народ давно бы не существовал.
We have about 500,000 of illegal immigrants, including hundreds of thousands of both military and civilian garrison of the Soviet Union. Now, and of course, they will be represented in the Supreme Soviet of Estonia. Now, of course, it would be entirely absurd to imagine a legal parliament which have representatives of the occupying army as members of parliament.
The Russian minority has set up its own organization, Intermovement, to voice its fears. Evgeny Kogan will fight to keep Estonia in the Soviet Union.
Если угроза будет нарастать, я думаю, что мы не будем просить ни у кого помощи. Мы считаем, что у нас достаточно возможностей, чтобы свою судьбу защитить самим. Мы не будем просить помощи из Москвы. Мы справимся сами.
Kogan's support lies in the industrial belt. Only 2% of the workforce at this factory is Estonian. The rest are Russian or other immigrants. They can be relied on to resist the independence movement with well-drilled discipline. These ethnic Russians have a brusque answer to the Estonian nationalists. Moscow may yield, but they want none of it.
Отрицательно.
Почему?
Мы хотим в Союзе жить. Эстония должна жить в Союзе.
Отсоединиться — это все равно, что прыгнуть с парашюта, как писал этот, и забыть парашют в самолете.
И эстонцы должны очень любить и уважать русский народ. Тогда вместе, совместно решать все вопросы. А отделять, вот, поставить эстонца на 3 лестницы выше, а русского на 3 лестницы ниже, а какого-то татарина еще поставить ниже, то это плохо. А вот все быть на одной ступеньке, работать всем дружно.
The old Estonian flag now dominates these Tallinn factories. But the Russian workforce has staged political strikes against independence. In and out of Russia, the Russians feel resentment. At the Kalinin factory, the strike has the support of the Ukrainian manager.
Изолировать себя от других национальностей невозможно. Мы все участвуем в развитии экономики республики. Но выставить за пределы интересов республики ту часть, которая неразрывно здесь живет, невозможно. И вот поэтому на определенном этапе нужно было сделать шаг привлечения этой части населения, что не произошло. И мне кажется, это была как раз ошибка, а это население должно было заявить о своих правах. И вот это заявление и было в виде забастовок.
There are 25 million Russians outside the Russian Republic, and obviously, as is always the case in decolonization, the fate of these colonists is going to be of extreme importance, and they do provide a potential base for an extremely nasty Russian nationalist reaction. These are people, of course, who traditionally have felt themselves to be part of the ruling people in the Soviet Union. Now they seem likely to become second-class citizens.
По демографическому положению сейчас примерно одна женщина рождает 1,5 ребенка. И немножко больше. И если это будет продолжаться, то через 2 поколения русских будет в 2 раза меньше, чем сейчас. Половина бюджета РСФСР идет в общий бюджет, а в большинстве республик он весь сохраняется. По оплате труда, ценам русские находятся в наихудшем положении.
In the volatile south, independence movements have brought bloodier clashes. In Tbilisi, the Georgian capital, the regional Russian army commander turned his troops on unarmed demonstrators. The result was a massacre. No one has died in the Baltic States independence campaign. Here in the south, passions run higher. Georgia has been united against Moscow and Russian domination. Once again, the local Communist Party has been pulled in the wake of demands for independence. Georgian nationalists, like Sviat Gamsakhurdia, claim that it is Moscow which incites discontent among their own ethnic minorities. They mix a potent cocktail of anti-imperialist rhetoric. Stalin forcibly incorporated his homeland into the Soviet Union in 1921. Now it wants to get out. Gamsakhurdia will not wait for elections.
there is no possibility for nations to be independent until communist dictator will be overthrown in Soviet Union. Because Communist Party in Moscow wants to retain empire. In spite of words about perestroika, democratization, and pluralism, they want to retain empire. You know, Gorbachev's policy is traditional imperialistic policy of Soviet Union. It is traditional Stalinist policy, only there is a little liberalization and nothing more. Because Soviet Union has not such strength as in Stalin's time. No.
In Azerbaijan, the army has intervened from weakness, not strength. Pogroms against the Armenian minority were eventually stopped by massive military intervention, with heavy casualties. Nationalism has been inflamed. So have Russian fears, as victims of the violence tell the world of their ordeal. This KGB officer has lost his daughter to a lynch mob. The army now has to hold the ring in politics.
As far as Azerbaijan is concerned, I think that the army was used too late. It should be used earlier, much earlier. Then we would avoid many victims that happened there, and it would be much easier. In Tbilisi, it was used too early. Maybe it shouldn't be used at all.
Возможность, в качестве возможной катастрофы, да, конечно, внутренней войны, распада на много частей, вероятно, с военными конфликтами и войнами, и боюсь, что в результате образования какого-то нового тоталитарного, нескольких, может быть, тоталитарных государств на их основе.
The army has seen its high prestige disappear. Its officers are insulted on the streets.
Они скоро прятаться будут. Пойдемте. Они скоро прятаться будут.
This crowd accuses the army of defending the Central Committee against the people. Conscripts refuse to serve outside their own republic. Military budgets are being cut. The career officers are rattled and uncertain.
Не надо этого делать. Ну я сейчас возьму, разобью вашу аппаратуру, понимаете?
Outside the General Staff building, Vitaly Yurasov whips up the crowd. He claims to represent the unofficial soldiers' trade union. Before Glasnost, the police would have arrested him. Now he shrugs them off.
Это имперское мышление. Это сталинистский подход. Мы ничего против бы не имели ввода в Азербайджан и в Армению войск ООН. Почему? Потому что в армии столько своих внутренних проблем, они сами напоминают сегодня внутренние болезни армии, Армению и Азербайджан. Там дедовщина, там коррупция, там семейственность, там протекционизм, там злоупотребление властью, там мордобой, там насилие старшего над младшим. И сегодня эту рассыпающуюся на глазах военную силу вводят наводить порядок в эти республики.
Well, you touched a very serious problem and very painful problem. For me, being a military man who served in the army for more than 40 years, I think that what is, of course you are right, that there is a going down a prestige of the army, and in a very weak manner, I would say, even for many reasons. I mean, you can't say that there is one reason. There are many reasons, but in general, it is a general reflection what is going on among the population. Undiscipline in general, loss of the belief in general, loss of a very low moral level of people.
Коррупция, спекуляции и так далее, разложение, идейная неразбериха и подрыв воли народа, подрыв его моральных устоев. Одновременно с этим падает авторитет Горбачева. И в свете того, что в нашей стране происходит в последнее время, ситуация непредсказуема. Она взрывоопасная. Я говорю об этом как солдат отечественный, как коммунист с болью в сердце. Понимаете? Говорят, на нас вешают ярлыки, что мы сталинисты. То есть приравнивают нас с фашистами и так далее и тому подобное. Если мы сталинисты, то сталинисты не в том понимании, которое нам хотят навязать, а в том понимании, что мы близко к сердцу принимаем боль Отечества.
The prevailing view in the West seems to be that if Gorbachev fails, he would be replaced by a kind of centrist, modern, moderate, technocratic reformer, rather similar to Ligachev. I think the center can no longer hold, that politics and society have been polarized by perestroika, and that the two muscular alternatives to rule the country with all its vast problems now are either Gorbachev's version of perestroika, which we might say is the open hand, or the neo-Stalinist version of perestroika, which is clamoring loudly in the wings, which is the closed fist.
Если тенденции, которые сейчас происходят в стране, а именно столкновения на национальной основе, будут продолжаться, то, я думаю, никакое правительство долго этого не выдержит. И в конечном счете этому правительству будет предъявлен счет.
Those who see Gorbachev as little better than a traitor have to bide their time. The generals left last week's plenum, keeping their thoughts to themselves. The army has a long tradition of political loyalty. Its last coup was in 1801. Conscripts far from home want to quit, not march on Moscow. But what would happen if economic failure merged with political collapse?
Может ли в СССР возникнуть военное правительство, ну, например, вроде правительства генерала Франка, что ли, вы имеете в виду, или Пиночета? Если будут дальше продолжаться, развиваться в болезненном направлении какие-то течения, о которых я говорил, если, например, начнется все более и более интенсивный распад экономический и на части просто политический распад страны, то это не исключено. Но это, конечно, будет уже чревато чрезвычайно тяжелыми последствиями. Это та опасность, которую мы должны перед собой видеть.
I am sure that in future there would be some military strikes, some military activity, maybe even in violent form, but not coup. I don't believe that any military in Moscow can master a coup. Those events can be local ones.
In the Russian heartland, there are movements that call for a new authoritarianism. Pamyat plays on Russian fears and dreams. This home movie shows Pamyat's public face as a defender of the tradition of church and Tsar. They restore monasteries and claim that their black shirt uniform is symbolic of order and discipline after the style of monks, not fascists.
Прежде всего, это пробуждение национального самосознания. Я думаю, для любого грамотного человека очевидным становится, что это такое пробуждение национального самосознания. Это отсутствие космополитизма. Потому что космополитизм – это отрицание Родины, отрицание народности, отрицание традиции. Мы не можем с этим смириться, потому что мы превратимся тогда в биороботов.
Cosmopolitan is traditional code for Jews. Pamyat newspapers don't hide their anti-Semitism.
Pamyat is between Stalinism and fascism. It would be better to say that Pamyat is a manifestation of Russian chauvinism. There are some Russians who feel that perestroika deprives Russians of their rights to be number one in the Union. More than that, they think that perestroika is demeaning Russian character and Russian people. And they try to defend it. But of course, they are defending so-called enigmatic Russian soul, not from the position of Bolshevism or Stalinism, but from the position of old Tsarist regime. That's why they are reactionary.
Stalin, too, was anti-Semitic.
I think you have to be a bit careful about saying that the Soviet Union has such strong anti-fascist traditions. After all, Stalin was in a sense a national Bolshevik and a sort of fascist. He did reintegrate some of the nastier aspects of traditional Russian nationalism and some very nasty new aspects of Russian nationalism into Marxism, Leninism. There is within the Soviet tradition, let alone the Russian pre-revolutionary one, a potential for authoritarianism.
Думаю, что должен победить разум. То есть тогда, когда в результате изучения истории, в результате обращения к национальным истокам, люди должны понять, где их место в этой истории и где их место в этой культуре. Если они не захотят этого понять и будут сопротивляться, значит, видимо, мы должны применить какие-то иные методы и формы борьбы.
Some wing of the so-called movement память